Welcome to Cake on Tuesday, where we spotlight the rule breakers, the underdogs who refuse to listen when everyone said it won't work. I'm Elizabeth Bieniek, and for the next 20 minutes, we're diving into another disruptive innovation story that proves sometimes the craziest ideas change everything. Today's guest is Jess Lowry, founder of Mindful Collective. After 2 decades at the intersection of technology, design, and human systems, spanning industries as varied as healthcare, retail, and government, and alongside community building work, where Jess scaled Girl Geek dinners in Melbourne and launched She Hacks ATX, She Designs ATX, and Velma magazine in Austin, the consistent thread was focusing on the space between systems and people, and on what happens when that relationship breaks down. Jess, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here.
I am excited to dig down into this problem statement that you teed up here. So can you first tell us a little bit about what set your soul on fire about solving this problem and the impetus behind Mindful Collective?
Yeah, so I love this question. It's, I think, my favorite part of your podcast series. And for me, I think there's a lot of correlations between what sets my soul on fire and a lot of the guests that you have on the show, which is that I really care deeply about other people. And I care about them both as just a person in the world, but mostly as a human-centered designer. And so what makes me come alive in my work is when I really understand the needs of other people and I can put them front and center and shine a light on them in a way that gives us really interesting, creative thinking around different solutions or different concepts, whatever it is that we're trying to achieve from a business perspective, but that we're able to do it in a way that really makes sense to our regular daily life and our reality. And so kind of, yeah, being able to like root down into what is a common thread across just all of us and produce things in the world that serve those needs.
I think that's so crucial, focusing on human-centric tech. You hear that buzzword kind of thrown around, all that human-centric AI, but in reality, if technology is not used to empower and connect people, what's the point? I mean, it's really trying to get to enhancing life. So I like that focus. Can you talk a little bit about what prompted you to start something in this space and the problem that we kind of teed up there behind Mindful Collective? This is a really interesting problem that you're going after, and I feel like it's very timely. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it started from personal experience. So I've worked in tech for almost 20 years and I've seen a lot of ebbs and flows and trends over time, especially when it comes to human-centered design and a business investment in that focus area. And what I found is over the last decade that there's like it's harder and harder to get businesses to invest in human-centered design, and it's faster and easier just to take a more technology-centered approach. There's less friction, it's faster, you can deliver quicker, and it's really interesting because AI actually makes that even faster. So there's this sort of weird thing happening right now in tech where we're able to deliver faster than ever before, and we think that we can get to our goals with less people. And so a lot of layoffs are happening. We're seeing a lot of movement and shifting and transitioning in the industry right now. And primarily for people like me who have a very deep rooted purpose, like my sense of why I do what I do is to be a human-centered designer. And when you take that out, it's like an empty experience for me. And so I started looking around at the job posts and who's hiring and what they're hiring for. And I just didn't see myself in it. And I kind of had this like identity crisis moment of like, is this over? Is like, am I done? Like I'm, I should be at the height of my career. Yeah. I was just like, I've invested almost 2 decades into this career and I love what I do and I'm not ready to give it up and I'm not ready to walk away. And so I started researching a little more about this moment and realizing that it's not just me. I'm not unique. There's a lot of people in a very similar position and they've experienced layoffs multiple times. Like some people have been laid off every 6 months over the past couple of years. So it's creating this burnout and this kind of like darkness in a way over, these like dark clouds over our heads in tech right now where we don't really know what the future looks like. We don't really know what our role is in that future. And we don't really feel like we have a lot of control. And so you kind of just become apathetic in a lot of ways and despondent. And you're, you talk to people and they're not happy. Even if you are in a job
Yeah.
still, even if you haven't been impacted by a layoff in the sense that you lost the job, but you're still impacted by the fact that less people are there and the camaraderie and the culture and the life at work is different, even if you've still kept your job. So it's still impacting all of us, but just in different ways. And the idea with Mindful Collective was to just speak truth to this moment and call it out for what it is and let people know that they're not alone in it, that we're all experiencing it in different ways on different levels, and that we have more control over our destiny than I think we are recognizing. And especially when we come together and sort of put together our energies collectively, we can start to see where we can add more value to the world and where we can make an impact. And we can do that without an employer. And maybe it's time for some of us to become our own employers. And maybe it's time for some of us to think more entrepreneurially and stop thinking like a employee. And that's a big shift. And that's a lot to ask of people. And I know a lot of us come from a mindset, especially Gen Xers and some of the people that are in their career for a long time and have had a lot of success and comfort in being an employee, and to not be as secure in your future as an entrepreneur is just not what some people really want to be doing. So it's not an easy transition. And I think not all of us need to make that transition, but we have choices. And I think that's a big part of what the collective aims to do, is to present more choice and opportunity to this moment so that people don't feel like they don't have any control over it.
Okay, you brought up something interesting, Jess, about the fact that the safe path in tech isn't necessarily status quo. And I think this is a really important thing because a lot of people get very comfortable in their careers and think, I don't want to shake things up, so I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. But we create this false sense of safety and security. That seems like that's fundamental to what your own mind shift and what you're building. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is something that's familiar to me because of my background as a consultant. And a lot of times with clients, this is exactly the mindset shift that we're trying to get them to make. Not necessarily the same shift, but any kind of shift from the status quo thinking to what potentially the future could look like. And when you're looking at innovation and transformation, which is as a consultant, the, predominant services I provide, it is very uncomfortable. And we like talking about change in this really sexy, exciting way because we love to think about the future in exciting ways. But the reason I called it Mindful Collective is that we're in the present moment and we're shifting and we're changing in this moment, not the future, not some other time, but right now. And we're experiencing it in real time, right? And so it's to ground ourselves in this reality of discomfort is part of change. You can't avoid it. You can't work your way around it. There's no magic pill. And so, yeah, I think it is really hard for people to get their. I struggle. I don't know anyone who doesn't struggle with change. Yeah. So
Right.
it's just the reality. Yeah.
And it seems like now where change is happening so rapidly and change is going to happen to you, whether you choose to embrace it or not, that creates an interesting situation, an interesting landscape. So I'm guessing, I mean, this is like many of my guests, you've had a successful career in other spaces and now you're launching out and doing something new. I'm curious about what sort of skills and abilities you're taking from your previous ones that have all culminated in now is the right thing and now is the right time. And also, how are you defining success? Because I imagine how you're defining success for Mindful Collective is a bit different from how you've defined success for your previous work.
Yeah, I think I've taken a lot of lessons from what I've done previously, and some of them are making sure that there's really a viable business case attached to this because especially with the other things you mentioned in my intro, Girl Geek Dinners as an example, I grew that from just a few people to over 100 people, which is small in scale in some regards, but at the same time, understanding how to grow something from nothing, how to galvanize people around a shared common goal or understanding is definitely a big part of this, is that we all understand this moment collectively. I don't have to work very hard to explain to people that they're experiencing something radical. But what is harder to explain is why they should trust me to join this collective and be a part of something that is really an experiment and that it isn't proven and that I can't promise them anything. I can't tell you you're going to join this collective and you're going to automatically get your dream job in 6 months. I can't do that. And that is also intentional in the sense that obviously I don't want to be inauthentic or misguiding to people. But what I've learned through a lot of the community building that I've done in the past is that the value is for the member to determine for themselves and the intrinsic reasons why they want to be a part of this, in the sense that I don't want to be alone in it anymore. And right now, there's not a lot of ways to go about navigating this collectively. You can go do a certification or you can go do some training, but you're doing that on your own. You're not doing that necessarily with a group of people moving through it with you. So I think learning how to do really effective community, sort of grassroots community building, is a big part of what I take with me into this, but also that there needs to be a viable business case attached to it. And that in order for this to be successful, I have to be able to pay certain people to work with me. I and myself need to get paid. That's something in the past I've struggled with. When I do something on my own, I, get really passionate and I just throw my whole life savings at the thing, and that's not realistic. So making sure that there's like a really good model attached to this that balances my needs and the team that works with me, but also with the members and our future clients. And I think also the willingness to be uncomfortable and be okay with other people's discomfort. I think when I was younger, especially early in my career as a consultant, it was really hard to hold space for people that were not comfortable, because when people aren't comfortable, they act in ways that are really hard, and when you're younger, you receive it as aggression, or you receive it as like people not
Right.
believing in you or judgment, or, you kind of internalize it. At least for me, I internalized a lot of that and made it about me. And I think what I've learned over, a couple decades is that it has nothing to do with me, and that it has to do with the individual. And what I can do for them is just recognize their discomfort and see if they can recognize it in their self, and that we can move through it together, because I'm willing to be there and hold space for that. But I'm not necessarily willing to just receive anger or aggression or anything that would be deconstructive to myself. But in the past, I think I did take on more and internalized more than I really should have.
Mm. I like the fact that you're pointing out too, you're building a passion project, but you're also building a viable business, and it needs to be both in order to be long standing. And I think that's really, really important and exciting, because you're at the early stages of building this, or identified a problem, and you're now putting together a solution to go after that problem. If we just project ourselves to 5 years in the future and Mindful Collective is wildly successful and you have founding members who are still with it, what would you want them to say looking back and say, Mindful Collective was great because what is that goal?
I think it gave us back our power and our control, in the sense that we can't determine the future, but we don't have to be passive observers of somebody else's determination of that future. And I think right now in tech, we've got a lot of people, whether they're VCs out of Silicon Valley or big tech CEOs, that are trying to paint a future for us in their image. And that their pro technology, typically, future does not really entail a lot of people. We talk about uploading our consciousness to a machine and living indefinitely. And I think 5 years from now, hopefully, we can see a future that is more viable to the human experience and the human, pro-human future that I think we actually really want to achieve, and what matters more to us as technologists, but also just as citizens.
Hmm. You talk also about how your previous work, you've worked across dozens of organizations, different industries, and you start to see patterns and starting to see those emerge. I'm a big systems and patterns and signals person myself. Can you talk a little bit about some of those patterns that you've seen emerge over time and how's that shifted over the last few years?
I think there's a few that really stick out. One is a project I did where the goal was to identify the North Star for a product team. And so it was sort of like, what are we all really working towards? Like, we've got this big backlog of things, all of these things that we want to achieve with this product, but what is it really about? And in doing that work, realized that there was this massive disconnect between the product team and the rest of the business. So, I talked about speed a little bit. When you overemphasize on speed and you use that as your core metric of success, you're not determining whether or not you're having a positive impact on people's lives, their customers' lives, their customers' businesses, but also internally across the business, are we positively impacting our fellow coworkers and employees? And what I found in that engagement was that customer service was not able to keep up with the pace of product. And so they weren't actually able to support customers in transitions from one release to the other. And so that disconnect over time actually costs the business a lot of money when you think of the amount of work it takes to solve problems instead of being in line with the needs of customers and solving problems for them from a product perspective that's in cadence with what they can absorb. Right. And, we talk about the speed of change. We have this weird culture in tech, and it's on the most micro level of I'm going to move as fast as I humanly possibly can. But not everybody can keep up with that. And it's actually a false metric when you think about the negative impact of this really obscure success measurement. And so I think what I found in a lot of teams that I worked with over the more recent, maybe past 5 years, 5, 10 years, is the overemphasis on speed is really creating a barrier for people to be effective in their work and to be effective with what they produce in their work.
Mm. You're hitting I have this little calendar on my desk that has the daily motivating quote, and there's one about a week or so ago, which I'm sure I'm gonna butcher completely, but the concept behind it was basically that one of the most inefficient things is optimizing the wrong thing, and that concept, I think, has been really top of mind for a lot of people lately because of the speed of technology, the speed of a lot of things with AI. We are optimizing for speed. And I think you're starting to see a little bit of that pendulum swing now of, okay, we're doing this really, really fast, but is it the right thing? Is it a quality thing? And you're seeing some companies kind of dial back a little bit on that and say, all right, let's focus on quality, not quantity. So I imagine that shift is something that is very top of mind for you. How do you see that playing out when we are still pressured to go fast and technology is changing quickly? How do you find that balance?
Well, I think that's what we're interested to explore with the collective. So, part of what we do that's different is when members join, we actually assess them on cognitive processing. So, every member that joins with the collective, they take this very simple assessment that helps us understand how they make sense of information and how they determine whether or not they understand something fully. And then we pair them with teams of three. We call them pods. And every pod is created to really complement one another's cognitive processing. And then they're also tasked with a different area of focus. So one person on the pod is really on human factors, the other is on technology factors, and then business factors. So it's sort of like this trifecta or like a three-legged stool concept of a team. And it doesn't mean that only one person works on technology and everybody else is working on other things. They all share the accountability for the outcome and they all share in producing the work required to complete tasks. But by having people accountable for a certain area of consideration, we can create collective responsibility. And I think that's one of the things that's really missing inside organizations right now is that we have a very individual focus of responsibility. And when things go wrong or things are missed or our success metrics point out somebody in particular is dropping the ball or not doing a good job, everybody freaks out because who wants to be that one person, right? Who's ultimately responsible and accountable for things when really that's not true. We know that one person couldn't possibly be the only person responsible or accountable, right? And so then nobody wants to be accountable. Nobody wants to be responsible. So we really want to experiment with what would that look like if we kind of created these pods and each of them are responsible and accountable for different things, but they're as a group, as a team, committed to a shared determination of success. So that's part of what we're trying to experiment with. And we're looking at the AI as a way to compete with speed, right? Because AI allows us to build things, especially in software, really quickly, really efficiently. It's not perfect, it's still evolving, but we can see all the indications are there that speed is not going to be the hindrance anymore. So if we don't have to worry about speed, because that's actually the superpower that we're getting with AI, that means that we can have the humans focusing more on their ability to serve the needs of people better. And so then our success metrics can be more about how good a job we're doing at serving the needs of people versus just putting this thing out as fast as humanly possible.
Mm. So it's really interesting because you are right in the build phase right now. You're in the thick of it. And this is something I like to talk about on this show because the title is Cake on Tuesday. It's about celebration. It's about finding joy in that. How do you find joy in the journey when you're in the middle of all of it, either personally or with your new entity?
Honestly, the thing that's been really great are conversations like this, honestly, and being able to talk to people about what I'm trying to do with Mindful Collective. And interestingly, almost every person I talk to asks, what can I do? How can I help? And that has been so powerful because, again, I'm used to trying to just do everything on my own, put everything of myself in it, and I'm not comfortable often asking for help. And this has been incredible because I haven't really had to ask. It's more been offered. And in the offering, that brings me this not only sense of, okay, I'm onto something and people seem to get it. And that's really exciting. But it's also that it's doing what it's meant to do, which is bring people together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great indicator that you are definitely scratching an itch that is out there and you're solving a problem. So that's awesome. Jess, if people want to join the collective, if they want to learn more about it, if they want to follow you on this journey, where do they go? And I understand you have a promo offer for our listeners today.
Yes, people can come to our website to learn more. It's a work in progress, but it's there for you and it's mindful collective.studio. And we have a promo. So you can come to the website and then you can use the promo code CAKE for free. So that's CAKE with number 4 free. And you'll get your first month free, which will include the cognitive assessment and evaluation. And you can find out if it's for you.
Amazing. Who doesn't love free cake? Thank you, Jess, so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining another Cake on Tuesday celebration of beautiful disruption. Please share it, review it, and find more innovative stories at podcast.cakeontuesday.com. I'm Elizabeth Bienik. Be bold, stay curious. Now go have some cake.